Welcome to the CHCH Newsmakers podcast. I'm your host, Rick Zamperin. If it's making news in Hamilton, Halton, and Niagara, across Canada or around the world, we're going to tackle it here on Newsmakers. A new report from Food Banks Canada says the hunger crisis in our country is getting worse. Its 2025 Hunger Count report shows more than 2.1 million visits to food banks in a month, nearly double from 6 years ago. And 1 in 3 are children. Joining us today is Karen Randell, the Executive Director of Food for Life, the largest food rescue organization in Halton and Hamilton. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Quite the sobering report, which we'll get to in a second.
Absolutely.
But let's set the foundation. Food for Life. What are you all about?
So Food for Life, as you indicated, is a food rescue hub that supports food insecurity programs all throughout Halton and Hamilton. So we rescue surplus food from all different aspects of the food industry, sort it, pack it for a program, and then distribute it to over 90 programs that support neighbors experiencing food insecurity all across Halton and into Hamilton.
I was lucky enough to take a tour of your facility. You invited me over a few weeks ago, and I was blown away at the magnitude of which your team operates at in terms of, because you're getting food from retailers, from restaurants, from a variety of locations, and then making sure it's okay, sorting it. You have hundreds of volunteers. It's a well-oiled machine.
It's really incredible, the work that takes place at Food for Life each and every day. We do rescue food from, like I said, all aspects of the food industry. So from our incredible farmers who often provide us with incredible products from their fields, to food manufacturers, distribution centers, directly from grocery stores and from some restaurants with prepared meals. We are able to rescue over 4.6 million pounds of food every year. That's valued at almost 16 million pounds of food. And then once that food comes to our warehouse, as you saw when you visited, we then check all of the food and ensure that it is of good quality, that it is edible. We want the standard of food we distribute to be the same as if somebody were accessing food from a grocery store.
Right.
And then that food is packed for our programs, and it's packed very intentionally to make sure the right, most appropriate and accessible food is going to the programs that we support. So if we know there's a community with very particular or specific dietary, cultural, ethical food needs, we are able to pack so that the food we send to that program meets that community's needs. We certainly don't want to see people having to compromise their food needs because they're experiencing food insecurity. So not only do we rescue and redistribute food at Food for Life, we add that really intentional piece to make sure that people get the food that they need.
It's called Food for Life. We're going to be talking about food insecurity, but you deal with more than just food. You have other items that people may not have the income to get.
Absolutely. We do receive donations from other folks who provide us with essential items like personal hygiene, household items, baby and infant items. You know, the more we can put out into food security programs, both the programs that Food for Life operates and our community partners, we know the more relief folks who are experiencing food insecurity get financially. We're not... we recognize that, you know, things like laundry soap, things like cleaning items, things like menstrual products are so expensive. So if people can access those things when they're showing up for a food visit, we're then able to provide them with some ability to redirect those finances towards other pressures that they're experiencing.
The Food Banks Canada report that just came out, I'm sure you were not surprised by any of the statistics, even though those of us who are not in your shoes or at a food bank, let's say in Hamilton or Halton or anywhere across this country, might have been surprised or shocked because we don't see these numbers all the time. You're seeing these numbers in real life human beings.
Absolutely. One of the things that really struck me in how that report was presented was the way they talked about how we're starting to normalize hunger, because that really is an enormous concern. concern. When we start to normalize something like people going hungry, we almost numb people to the urgency of the situation. And we can't have hunger be seen as an unfortunate but inevitable part of our society. We have to continue to frame it as a crisis that requires action and requires a response from all levels of government to ensure that there are policy, there are programs, and there are safety nets in place to allow all people across Canada to have access to the food they need to feed themselves and to feed their families.
It wasn't that long ago when we thought of hunger being a famine in Africa, or you had to be homeless to be hungry, and that's not the case.
No, it's not the case at all. In fact, I've been working in food insecurity for about 12 years, and the face of hunger has really changed throughout that time. There was a moment in time when I first started working in this space when food bank visits really picked up at the end of the month, when people who were receiving social assistance started to have access to less resources and require food supports. We now see our visits across all food security programs being maxed out every day of the month. People who are accessing the programs are not just individuals on Ontario Works. We see people who are collecting disability checks, who are working, seniors who are collecting seniors benefits. There is no longer one demographic that is solely or disproportionately affected by hunger. At Food for Life, in the past year, over 50% of our neighbors who accessed one of our programs for the first time identified employment or that they were actively seeking employment as their income source. And that, again, should be very concerning, because we live in a country that should have the means for everyone to have access to the food they need to feed themselves, to feed their families. And it seems like that standard just continually becomes eroded. It used to simply be that, if someone was on Ontario Works or not working, they might need food support. Now we're seeing folks who have full-time jobs needing to stop at food banks from their way home from work to access food. And I think we need to really step back and decide, what is the quality of life we want for everyone who's living in Canada? And does that quality of life include stress-free access to the food that they require? And if so, it's time to have all levels of government start to look at what their role is in creating that society and allowing that standard of life to be available to everybody.
Given that, and you're dealing with food insecurity 24/7, 365, basically, you're seeing people come in, they need something at any point in a particular month. Do you go home feeling like you're shaking your head thinking, obviously you're making a difference, but there's so many people that need a helping hand?
It can certainly feel overwhelming. Some days it feels insurmountable. But I have to say, the response by the community to always step up when we see these increases is really phenomenal. The resiliency of the food security sector is something to really be celebrated. The Food Banks Canada report speaks to a doubling in food bank visits from 1 million to 2 million visits monthly across Canada. And this is a system that has absorbed that through fundraising efforts, through food raising efforts, through that resiliency I spoke to, has continued to stand ready in response to this crisis. But I don't know that it's the responsibility of the food security system to continually do more with less, or reach out to the community and ask them to continually do more in support. We really need to look at bigger picture strategies that allow life to be more affordable for Canadians.
Let's get to that, because you've used the word crisis a couple of times in describing food insecurity in Halton, Hamilton. We can spread that across the country, given this Food Banks Canada report. And whenever we have a crisis, we turn to policy or government to intervene and do something about it. What needs to be done? Where are we lacking?
I believe that we really need to look at the drivers of food insecurity and the drivers of poverty, and primarily income inequality, concerns about access to jobs that pay people a living wage that allow them to meet all of their basic needs without relying on food banks and other safety net programs. We need to look at housing costs. Housing costs are astronomical. A report just came out that looked at someone on OW and someone on ODSP in Hamilton and what they're left with at the end of the month once they pay just for housing is often $0 or just a few $100s. And if that individual has other household expenses, which we all do, they simply do not have the ability to pay for food. So we need to look at housing affordability, investing in more housing, investing in jobs that will allow people to make a living wage, and looking at all of those other drivers of poverty. Affordability, food affordability over the past 3 years has been climbing at a rate that's really difficult for households to sustain, and then we start to see those households showing up at emergency food programs to help them out.
Ever since the pandemic especially,
Absolutely.
House prices have gone up, food prices have gone up, inflation has gone up, the cost of just living has gone up. Governments have tried to do certain things. It doesn't seem to make a dent, or you must be frustrated at this point.
It's certainly frustrating to see more and more people struggling. It's often frustrating to see governments fighting amongst each other to figure out who's at fault and who needs to fix it. I do believe there needs to be some collaborative work amongst all levels of government to see what pieces are held at different levels of government and how investments can be made, not only in support of emergency food programs, but in support of the people who rely on them, so they don't need to be so reliant, so that people have the ability to become more financially healthy and really start to thrive in their lives, instead of what we're hearing from our neighbors is, barely surviving and just, getting by week. It's just this survival mindset that doesn't allow people to start to plan for their future.
Anyone who's gone to the grocery store clearly realizes the prices are not going down, have not gone down for a while. Is this situation only going to get worse?
I hope not. I know that it's brought up quite a bit about how we can really start to work alongside our grocers in Canada, and I know it's been addressed at a federal level. As are prices being inflated? Are those the true prices? I don't know. I certainly don't have enough expertise in that space, but I do know it's concerning when you see prices continuing to rise. Prices of things that are nutritionally important for people seem to rise at a higher rate and become increasingly unaffordable.
Let's talk a little bit more about Food for Life and the job that you do in the area. How does it work? Does someone just show up and say, hey, I need some food?
So there's two pieces to it. The first piece is the support we provide to our community partners. So about 45 programs operating food banks, meal programs, and other food supports throughout Halton and Hamilton receive food from us on a weekly basis. And they all operate their programs differently depending on who they serve and how they serve them. At Food for Life, all of the programs that we run are open to anybody who shows up and identifies having a need. So we do not ask for any income information. Somebody showing up demonstrates that they are experiencing food insecurity. We really try to look at what the gaps are in the food security space and how we can start to build programs that are accessible, that remove barriers, and that provide food to people in a way that they can easily accessed. So we have partnered with Halton Housing and City Housing Hamilton to run pop-up markets in some of their lower income seniors buildings. So we know transportation can be a barrier for seniors. Moving food back and forth can be a barrier. So we actually set up programs every week in their common spaces. They can come downstairs, they can do a shop and go back up to their apartments. We work alongside different social service agencies and provide fridges. So for example, the Goodwill Employment Centers in Hamilton, we set up fresh fridges. So when people are looking for employment, potentially having limited income, they can access some good nutritious food while they're doing their employment searches and then not have to go to another program to access food.
You do, in my tour, have a couple of fridges that are sitting there and you're looking for a new home. Do you want to make a pitch to municipalities or agencies that might want to have one?
So we do have fresh food lockers that we purchased over the pandemic. Some of them are housed at different library locations throughout Halton. And these are really ideal for folks who maybe can't access one of our market programs while they are operating, potentially because of work hours or other pressures like childcare needs. So we have these lockers that people can book a locker appointment, get a code, and go and pick up their fresh basket when they're able to. And we do have a couple of sets of lockers currently that aren't housed. So if there are any spaces that are looking to provide some good support for their neighbors experiencing food insecurity, you can certainly reach out to us at Food for Life and have a conversation about potentially housing them.
For those people who are accessing the services of Food for Life, what impact do you see in their body language and their facial expressions in knowing that they have somewhere to turn to get the food that they need?
We engage our neighbors and folks who access our program several times throughout the year, typically through our research initiatives and through surveys to really understand how our programs support them, and also to understand where we're falling down and where we could potentially be doing a better job. One of the areas that I think is really important to speak to in terms of our impact is remembering that access to good, nutritious food supports individuals' physical health, their mental health, as well as their social well-being. So we hear from our neighbors that access to food, it's decrease their isolation, that they feel physically better, can actually go out and engage with their friends, that coming to our markets is an opportunity for them to engage with other neighbors. Depending on which program they access, there are a lot of social elements to it. One neighbor in our most recent survey actually said that accessing food from Food for Life weekly has allowed them to start to pay down some loans they had to take out to pay rent, to pay for groceries, and for the first time in several years has started to be able to think about a future that they stopped letting themselves dream about. Wow. So the impact is, yes, feeding people, but I think our true impact is really allowing people to see a future, to see their own personal wellness in a broader way, and to start to engage in society in a more healthy and meaningful way.
There's another impact that you provide, and that's an environmental impact.
Absolutely.
4.5, I think was the term, 4.5 million pounds of food diverted from landfill, basically, at the end of the day. That's a huge impact.
Yeah, we really do have an enormous environmental impact. We try to look at our food rescue as primarily we want to first and foremost feed as many people as we can. Then we look at how we can feed animals, and then we look at how we can feed the planet. So out of the 4.6 million pounds we rescued last year, 6% of that food was inedible, meaning that it was past date and it wasn't able to go out into program. Only 1% of that, or actually less than 1% of that, ended in landfill. So we first look to some of our amazing farm partners who will take our food that is not edible for humans and use it to feed their livestock and really use it to compost their lands and really ensure that food doesn't end up in landfill. We also work alongside Halton Region and ensure as much food that can be composted is composted. So we're continually looking at alternative waste streams to make sure as little food as possible ends up in landfill.
Another big part of Food for Life is your amazing volunteers.
Yes.
And it's not just one or a dozen or 50. There's a lot of them.
Absolutely. Last year, Food for Life had over 800 active volunteers, and our volunteers do everything from supporting our drivers on the road and rescuing and delivering food. They help out in our warehouse, help out in our pack room. We have incredible volunteers helping out in our pack room, doing that sorting and packing for program. The value of the volunteer hours last year was 37,000 hours of time donated, which is over 4 full years of time that is donated. And this year we're looking to surpass that. The volunteerism that we see at Food for Life is extraordinary. We hear a lot from our community partners that they're really challenged to re-engage and find volunteers to support their programs post-COVID, and we do not have that at all. Our programs and our impact is so driven by our volunteers. It's really hard to speak to the incredible impact. Our team is a small team of 22, and we can only do the work that we do because we have these phenomenal, devoted, committed volunteers who believe in our mission.
It's a great way for high school students to fill up their volunteer hours, but there were retirees there when I did the tour. There were some young people, people of all ages volunteering.
Yes. Absolutely. We have people from all over Hamilton and Halton of all ages, of all demographics coming to volunteer. We actually run an evening pack on Wednesday nights that is specifically for students who are looking to gain their volunteer hours. We have an incredible number of corporate teams who come and support a shift in the pack room as a way of giving back. So there's just an incredible amount of support that we receive from the community.
You also have a number of amazing partners that donate the food at the end of the day. And that, I mean, you couldn't do what you do without their help.
Absolutely. Our food partners are an essential part of the work that we do, and we're always incredibly grateful. There is some misconception around rescued food, that it is all end-of-life food, that the quality isn't good, but the majority of the food we rescue is actually what we would consider first run. So it's food that is deemed surplus before it even goes into the food system. So it is excellent quality. It's got lots of life on it. And so we're incredibly grateful for all of the food manufacturers, distribution centers, grocery chains, like smaller grocery stores, farmers, and communities who do food drives to ensure that we have the food necessary to continue to meet the growing need in the community.
This is the 30th anniversary for Food for Life. What's the anniversary season been like?
Well, it's really incredible to think about 30 years of impact. Obviously, the fact that we're still needed and the need continues to grow is not something that we necessarily want to celebrate, but I think it's worth celebrating the fact that Food for Life has certainly been able to respond to the growing need. An organization that started 30 years ago by an individual who saw a need in his small community and started to pick up unsold bread from a bakery and distribute it to neighbors he saw struggling has grown into something that allows for $16 million of good, nutritious food to land on the plates of households experiencing food insecurity is really quite extraordinary.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
You also undertake an annual neighbor impact survey.
Yes.
What's that about, and what kind of feedback do you get?
Yeah, so we seek out feedback from our neighbors who access our programs several times a year, but our neighbor impact survey is really our larger survey where we want to better understand our neighbors' experience with food insecurity and the impact of the work that we are doing in their lives. So that survey looks at a number of different metrics. We look at, obviously, demographics, where our neighbors live, the communities they belong to, their sources of income, ages, but we also want to understand their food insecurity experience. So we do use the FICE scale that really allows us to understand how people are experiencing food insecurity. The other metrics we really look at are what impact have we had on people's physical health, their mental health, and that social well-being. Do people feel better for accessing our programs? And the final piece that we look at is healthcare savings. So we're actually able to talk about the savings that pass on to our healthcare system when people have access to good, nutritious food.
What's next for Food for Life?
Well, I would say what's next for Food for Life is continuing to understand what our neighbors need, continuing to understand how we're meeting that need, and how we can improve our programs to ensure that we are doing what our neighbors need us to do. And that's the other piece of that neighbor impact survey, is understanding where we might not be meeting the need and how we can build our programs and build out a more responsive approach to food insecurity so that everyone feels they're able to get what they need when they access our programs.
I'm sure you see a lot of repeat people who come to Food for Life for assistance. Is a measure of success not seeing that person after a while?
Potentially. I think that's one measure of success. With food insecurity, it's really important to remember that there needs to be a lot of different pieces changing in someone's world for them to no longer rely on a food security program. For us, one of the measures of success is people finding stability in their food insecurity. So if by accessing our programs weekly, that means somebody no longer struggles to pay rent or utilities, that's success. Right. Somebody potentially finding employment that allows them to earn an income that reduces their need on our programs is also a success. But I wouldn't want that to be the only success, because people who come to our programs have so many financial pressures. Access to food often allows them to start paying other areas of those pressures off.
If someone wants to volunteer, or someone wants more information, or they know of someone who could utilize your service, how can they go about getting in touch with you?
Yeah, you can visit our website, foodforlife.ca, or give us a call at 905-635-1106.
All right, congratulations on 30 amazing years.
Thank you.
To many more ahead. Even though we don't want you around, we certainly do, because of the success that you are showing in our community.
Well, thank you so much, Rick.
Thank you. And that is a wrap for Newsmakers. Thanks for checking out the Newsmakers podcast. And a big thank you to the all-star cast behind the scenes. If you like today's episode, click the thumbs up, hit subscribe, leave a comment, catch the Newsmakers podcast on chch.com/podcasts and wherever you get your favorite podcasts.